fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with your idea. Because if you
Right.
fall in love with the problem, you're going to be willing to adapt and listen to the market. But if you fall in love with your solution or your idea, you might be blindly heading toward a trajectory that's not necessarily what the market needs or wants.
Welcome to the Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. This is Phil Michaels, Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and performance coach. Every year, Forbes names the top 30 entrepreneurs, leaders, and stars in the world. And each week, I bring you one of them to help you level up in your life and business. From celebrities like LeBron James to Kylie Jenner and Cardi B, to entrepreneurs with companies like DoorDash, Instagram, and YouTube, you're sure to learn from the list. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now it's time to level up. Level up.
Welcome to Phil with Forbes 30 podcast. Today we have a very special guest. She is the co-founder and CEO of the mobile and web app Space Basic. The app is a platform to manage hostels and student housing matters, including attendance, payments, and room allotment. Since launching in 2017, Space Basic quickly grew from 6,000 users to 200,000 users last year and is targeting 1 million users this year. In 2019, she was named as one of the top 60 women transforming India by the Indian government and the United Nations. Please welcome Madhavi.
Hi, thank you for having me, Phil.
Very excited to have you here. Welcome. It is my pleasure and my honor. I'm very excited to learn more about your business and share it with the audience. But before we do, where were you when you found out you made the Forbes list?
I was quarantining at home when I found out that I made it to the Forbes list. Ideally, I thought ideally I would have liked to probably celebrate that, but I think just making it to the list was good enough for me to kind of celebrate it at home with family. But yeah, I was definitely at home.
Who was the first person you shared it with?
With my dad, because I'm sure he's heard me say the word Forbes 30 and the 30 a million times. So it was just a reflex for me to kind of go and let him know.
I mean, that must have been such a proud moment, not only for you, but for your family as well. How did your dad take it?
He was very excited for me, and definitely, I mean, this is something that I've always kind of wanted to have that ticked off since I became an entrepreneur. And I think most entrepreneurs definitely something on a bucket list. But quite frankly, for me to have made it to the Asia list, it was really a reminder that anything is possible with hard work and grit. And it was just one of the reminders of why I really started Space Basic, and the entire journey really flashed. I had a quick moment of that when I saw my name there on the list. It was a great feeling.
It's a rewarding moment, a great feeling, a validating feeling, like, wow, this is actually working and it's getting recognized by those at the top. Take us back to the very beginning, where you're from, where you grew up, and the path that led you to where you are now, ultimately making it to the list.
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Bangalore. I did my schooling here, born and brought up, and I moved overseas. I moved to Australia to, further my education after my bachelor's of engineering. So I was in Sydney for about 4.5 years. So I studied there, and I worked for an early stage startup there as well. And I think I was like third employee to be hired, and just working for a startup in a fast paced environment, and really having that experience and exposure. The company I worked for quickly grew to over 60, 70 people team in a span of 4 years. And I kind of ended up working different roles, and I really enjoyed the process. And I think that's where my love for startups really began.
That's actually a great tip of advice for those that are thinking about starting their own company, starting their own business. try to work for another startup, another business that might be going through some of the challenges you'll face on your own. It's a great learning experience. Can you walk us through maybe one of the things you learned that helped you take it to your business?
Sure. I think culture. Something, for me, that was my first job. So I started as a front desk receptionist. Then I kind of was taking care of IT support. And, finally, I was product manager of the Asia Pacific region. So I kind of transitioned really into something that I liked to do. And having said that, I think something that really stuck to me was just mentorship, was having that culture where it's okay to ask questions, it's okay to do more than what your role as you're supposed to. And I think what I see in general is people are very kind of closed off when it comes to, hey, that's out of my pay grade. I think that kind of closes you off from opportunities. And I think that's something that I try to kind of, tell the people who work at Space Basic as well, that it's the culture and experiencing different things and kind of really embracing it and not treating it as boundary driven. I think that has definitely kind of helped me see through.
That's a great point. You can't just say, oh, that's not my job. Or
correct. Yeah,
that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. That's your job. In a startup, you need to be all things at all times. Whatever's needed at that moment, everybody needs to put a hand in it and get to work. And it sounds like you were able to learn that on your the first company you worked at. And how did you transition to your own company? How did you come up with that idea? What happened after you left that company?
So, when I was there around 4.5 years, I kind of had this urge to start a company. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what I'm going to do, but I just knew that I wanted to start something on my own. So what I did was I was on a trip to the US, and I was introduced to a successful woman entrepreneur in the Bay Area, and I was going to be there for a couple of days. So I wrote into her and asked her if I can meet with her, and a 5-hour conversation kind of ended up, with us being co-founders and starting Space Basic. So that was probably a very good defining moment for me. And just with her, kind of, she wanted to do something in the education space. I did too, but I didn't know what problem I'll be solving exactly. As an international student in Australia, I could draw a very clear differentiation between the quality of education and services there versus what I was used to when I lived in India. So, that problem had to be solved. So, that's something that was in the back of my head, and she was, on board the same thing. And we were both of Indian origin, and we kind of wanted to give back and contribute, and the Indian startup ecosystem was coming up and about. This was 2016, 2017. And we really wanted to be there, and we really wanted to kind of, help with the social and economic growth besides just starting a company there. So she said, hey, I would do this with you. And I'm like, okay. And I went back to Australia, packed my bags, and I was in Bangalore in about 2 weeks.
Wow. So you went from a 5-hour conversation to starting your own company with someone you just met.
Mm-hmm. I knew it. I think the gut feeling as a trait is so underrated, because as entrepreneurs, most of the time we're making gut-driven decisions, not so much data-driven decisions, at least initially, tell me why a right reason to live a job that pays you really well, come back from a country like that and start something when we know, and you don't even know what you're going to do. Like, what problem are you going to solve? So I think gut decisions are actually very underrated.
So that's so true. Getting better at listening to your gut is great advice. We make so many subconscious decisions because we simply don't have the data. So we need to make quick decisions, uninformed decisions sometimes, and we have to go with our gut. And for you, it sounds like it felt right. What was the first thing you did after you got back to Bangalore?
So once I got back to Bangalore, what I did was I started researching a little bit more about the space. I think our due diligence was very thorough, and I'm very proud of that, because I think that's how we really reached to solving a real problem part of it. So I would have spoken to at least a few hundred people, in this ecosystem to really understand what problem we'll be solving. And we quickly understood that there definitely was a gap in terms of ops and management within student housing communities and hostels, as we call it here in India, university student housing communities. So even a very well-known institution would follow the same manual processes as maybe that of a not so well known educational institution. It could be a school, college, so on and so forth. So we saw that to be a persistent trend there, and we kind of knew that we had. I mean, that was not addressed. So we built a prototype in 2017, after about 7 to 8 months of due diligence. Built a prototype, picked 3 pilot customers, worked very, very closely with them, and built a prototype. And they're still our paying customers today, 3 years later.
It's amazing. And for those listening, just so you know, they help university housing be managed through an app rather than using an antiquated manual process of maybe handwritten details and having a lot of staff members in person managing it. It sounds like, can you share with the audience more about how it actually works? Because I know they're going to benefit from hearing this, especially if there's someone in charge of administration at a university. How does it work?
Sure. So let me walk you through a usual day in a student housing community, right? So student wakes up, goes for breakfast. In India, usually they have to check in via maybe a signature in a book or maybe verbally, after which they usually check in at the gate to go to university, attend class, come back again, check in. If they have any, issues or maintenance requests that they have to, kind of lodge, it's done usually via verbally or written in a book, or, it's pretty ad hoc. And let's say at end of day, there's usually a head count as to are all the students in, or are they
And these
out,
could be thousands of students.
Oh yeah. And like 3,000, 6,000, so they are a little more stringent with women in terms of safety. So the end of day head count is pretty important for them. So usually what happens is the person in charge has to go to every room and check in, or the students would have to come to the person in charge and check in. So either way, as you see, it's pretty tedious. Or they would do a biometric check-in, or a facial recognition check-in, but that's very rarely checked because they're so different devices, different platforms, so on and so forth. That's an average day. What we do is with Space Basic, they check in on their mobile phones when they go for breakfast. It's a QR code. That way, when at the gate, again, it's a digital check-in, QR code, or a facial. We integrate with IoT, so it could be facial rec, or it could be biometrics, so on and so forth. They get to raise any sort of maintenance requests, housekeeping requests, so on and so forth from their room by just clicking a picture saying, "Hey, you guys need to come and fix this," and that follows its own SLA. And headcount, things like that. It could be it's integrated with IoT, or it could be via the app itself. The student checks in, and somebody kind of confirms that via the application. So usually something that's about 2 hours is kind of about 2 minutes, or maximum 5 minutes.
Wow.
So
you're saving them a lot of time. You're also making sure the students are safe at all times, because they have to scan the QR code. That's similar in the US. We live in a high rise, and the security guard, to prove that the security guard is going around and doing their checks, they have to scan their device at specific locations by a certain time. And it sounds similar to this, where the students
Right.
come in, they scan the QR code. You now have the data of which students have arrived rather than having to do this in person or written. This sounds like a no-brainer. Why is
Correct.
every
And another
university?
thing,
Yeah, go ahead.
another thing, sorry, I want to add here is one thing that I really like about this is the fact that we're able to save wastage with food because we have the activity of the student. We're able to analyze trends based on how many people really come for breakfast or lunch or dinner, and people how many how many of them really check in. We're able to analyze this trend and really give out accurate results versus how much they usually end up cooking and wasting. So I think with this and saving food, that's really important to us, and we're really glad to be able to reduce wastage in very critical ways.
Amazing. Yeah, with the data, you're able to see patterns and trends and able to make informed decisions now about how much food do we need to supply the cafeteria with because X amount of people are coming for breakfast. It's genius. It's a no-brainer. So you started doing customer validation, which I love. You started identifying, what is the problem? Is this a big enough problem? And what are the variables within that problem before you even started building something? I love this because a lot of people start building something and then find out if it's a real problem or not. You did what is smart, which is you found out what is the problem, what are the variables, and then built a prototype around that. Got 3 customers as a pilot to test it out and show, let's see how this works. Let's see what needs to change after X amount of time. And it worked, and they're still your paying customers today. So how many universities are you in right now? And are universities your main ideal client?
At the moment, yes. At the moment, we are with about 74, 75 universities across 8 cities here in India. Universities, colleges, and schools, all together, about 75 customers in India.
Wow. Congratulations. That's incredible. What 8 cities are they? So people that are listening can get access.
Bangalore, that's where I'm from, so we have to be here. Bangalore, Mumbai, around Delhi, we're in Kota, we're in Pune, Hyderabad, a couple of regions around Bangalore, Mangalore, and a few more.
What's the largest university you're working with now?
A university called Manipal University. They're pretty big. They have, medical school, they have engineering, a lot of courses. And we're working with them. We recently signed up with them last year, and it was inbound. So that's the best part.
Good for you. Yeah, referrals. So can you offer this outside of India? What if there's a university, someone from administration at a university listening, and they want to get access to your platform, or they're outside of India?
This year was definitely, we were in the process of working with a couple of universities overseas. We had a couple of inbound requests from Southeast Asia as well as from UAE. But because of the current COVID situation, we're waiting it out, before we kind of get to it.
How has that affected your business since, attendance is one, how much food they're eating? How has your model shifted, or how are you playing offense rather than defense during this time?
I think with COVID, what we've realized is we've been able to kind of pivot and kind of, in a good way. When I say pivot, what I mean is we've been able to utilize Space Basic. Because of COVID, there's been accelerated growth with existing customers. So what I mean by that is existing customers kind of use it not only in their dormitories, but also within the entire university. For maybe communicating, so on and so forth. It's easier, versus a traditional system. Besides that, we also see different use cases come up. So we had a university that has a hospital reach out to us. So in the hospital, they've been using Space Basic to communicate in terms of with nurses or COVID doctors on duty, or regular doctors and so forth. So that's I think is a great use case there.
That's a great
Apart from
idea.
that,
Any medical
yeah,
institution can use this. Any large entity that has a large number of attendees, for example, or participants or
absolutely,
customers,
absolutely.
sounds like they could benefit from this. So outside of just attendance tracking, what other data do you provide?
A communication. So it could be announcements, it could be a two-way communication, it could be polls and surveys. Really, with COVID, for students who are coming back to stay in dormitories when they have to come back to class, they can send surveys in terms of where have you been, where you're coming from, have you had any contacts, so on and so forth. We're also providing this to government entities here in Bangalore, where Space Basic is being utilized to communicate and to send out surveys about sanitization in private, densely populated housing communities. So we've been seeing usage in not just our typical university housing, but also in the surrounding community of densely populated housing.
Amazing. It's amazing. It sounds like this pivot, like you said, is for a good thing. You're going to offer up your platform for additional customers outside of just the university atmosphere, like hospitals, for example. This is incredible.
Right.
And so how do you feel you found success? I mean, there's got to be other companies that were trying to compete with you and trying to get into the universities.
Mm-hmm.
So when was that moment that you found success?
I think, one thing that we did really well was due diligence and working very closely with customers. So we follow a rule in Space Basic, which is if beyond 5 customers ask for something that's not there, we need to validate it with maybe another 20, 30 customers to see if that's really required and will they pay money for it. So that's another important part. So when we build something, for even our pilot users were paid customers, that's how we know we're solving a real problem. And that was important to us. So I think that has been, and we've been able to achieve the scale with, relatively smaller team. And that's because, we did the initial, due diligence and customer feedback. We still do that. Oh, and that's very important for us for business as usual. So I think that's probably one of a key element that has played a good role.
And then what was the single most important personal attribute that you believe got you to where you are today?
I think that's just not giving up, really. I think it's just keep going. I think as entrepreneurs, that's just something, regardless of the outcome, we just have to believe in the product and believe in our customers and their feedback and the market and just keep going. And I think that's what I did.
A relentless perseverance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Was there a time you felt like giving up?
I wouldn't say giving up, but just tired, really. You just like step back and you have these days when you're just like, gosh, I'm so out of it. And we have those moments. Initially, I had a lot of people tell me that it was a stupid idea, and for me to come back from Australia to India to start this and kind of like really move back in with my parents and, kind of start from scratch. I was always told that, I was told that it's too niche and things like that. But again, trusting your gut and kind of like really backing that up with enough validation, I think has definitely helped in this process.
What would you advise someone in that situation? Like, what do you do to get yourself out of those moments when maybe you're doubting yourself, you're doubting the idea, people are saying this isn't going to work, it's too niche? What did you do, and what advice would you give others that are feeling that way?
Well, I think, it's first of all, it's important for you to believe in the product. It's really important. And believe it in a way where, and I'm going to say this again, where I say you have to back it up with validation. I could be thinking something, but the market could be saying something else. And the customer who you're asking to use your service could want something else. So there's a complete mismatch there. And I think that's what happens in most cases. So I think to be real with yourself, to be real with what you're doing and building that, and know that it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. It's a very, very draining process, but it's a beautiful journey. So you just have to like sit back and get ready to get your hands dirty and do the work.
And enjoy the ride
there's no
along
magic
the way.
sauce. Yeah, it's true.
And I love that advice. It's like, fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with your idea. Because if you
Right.
fall in love with the problem, you're going to be willing to adapt and listen to the market. But if you fall in love with your solution or your idea, you might be blindly heading toward a trajectory that's not necessarily what the market needs or wants.
Agree.
What's something maybe along your journey that was your biggest lesson that maybe you wish you had learned sooner?
I think a lot of my lessons had to do around hiring and around, kind of team building. It was more, I think for me, was a little culturally as well, because I've worked predominantly in Australia. I've never worked before my job in Australia, and then I moved straight away to India. So, expectation management and kind of like team building and, just hiring in general. I think that went to a more processed, with a lot of processes now than it used to be. So I think a lot of my lessons had to be with effective hiring and KPI driven outputs and things like that. So for sure, hiring.
How different was the culture from Australia to India?
I think, in India, it's great in a way because there's so much diversity. People are really excited to work with, and there's a young population. Like most of the people who work today at Space Basic are, freshly out of college or, or started their careers really with us. But with that also comes molding, and also comes mentorship and, expectation management and things like that. See, in Australia, people start working at a very young age. As soon as maybe after you get like jobs, but in India, the culture is you have to, most of the time, have to kind of, graduate at least with an undergraduation and then get a job. So most of the teaching that happens at that age, versus people already come with a professional mindset because it's ingrained by working jobs earlier on. But in India, that has to kind of like develop at that point. So I think that way, it was a little challenging for me to understand that. And then we had to move it out to really outcome driven, performance driven, KPI driven, working styles and cultures, basically with respect to jobs and outcomes.
Yeah, because it sounds like you moved from a professional mindset hiree versus a student mindset hiree. I mean, the
Correct.
Australian culture sounds similar to the US. I mean, I think I had my first job at like 11 years old. And so you grow into this culture of having your first job, having multiple jobs, what it takes to deliver results. Whereas my student mentality is much different. So what did you do differently? It sounds like you added KPIs, but what did you do for your own training? How did you learn these things?
Mostly, I think, with mistakes that you make, for sure. I think your experiences are your best teachers, but I also have a great team of mentors who really helped me with this entire process. Self-learning, of course. I love reading books. I love watching podcasts and kind of watching a couple of tutorials or videos.
Excellent. So
yeah, sorry about the network.
No, it's okay. Completely understandable. Yeah. I know you have hurricanes over there, tornado right now going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of a cyclone because of, the cyclone that happened up north. So I think there's a bit of a ripple effect. So, yeah.
So speaking of mentors and maybe the courses that you took, the tutorials, what's something you use to help learn this? So one, what is the book or podcast that helped you with the hiring process and building this culture and managing this student mindset of a team? And who were the most pivotal people in your life, your mentor, your coach, to get you to where you are today?
So I definitely think my co-founder, Indunawar, she is definitely a big influence for me. I think for her to have already, been there, done that really in a way too, and kind of really help with the whole process. I think that helps with, first-time entrepreneur mistakes and, pitfalls and things like that. So she's been extremely helpful and kind of helps me with just like sometimes we just need people to brainstorm and to kind of talk about certain things that happen on day-to-day basis, and then you have your aha moment. So I think she's been extremely helpful with strategy and to kind of really hear me out through the process. Definitely her. And also, being a woman entrepreneur and having a woman mentor is also in a way to connect. I think it's really been very helpful.
Yeah, how did that transition into you managing the student mindset in Bangalore? Was there an issue with insubordination or authority from your aspect?
Right. So when I was working for my previous company, I would we would have it all structured, and I liked to be organized just generally, but that's not the case all the time. And I never had a culture see where I had to be monitored, but in certain cases you do have to. So when you're a company that is growing and you don't have a hierarchy, it becomes a little bit difficult to kind of manage everybody individually. And it's counterproductive if you ask me. So a lot of my time would drain there, and there would be lesser productivity. So we had to kind of downsize and really think about who are we hiring, and it had to be a really outcome driven approach. So that's how we kind of changed it to an outcome driven approach versus just picking based on past experiences and things like that.
So it's less associated with the person giving you the command. It's more of like, did you hit your metric, your KPI, your key
Correct.
performance indicator or not? There's a great book about this. I mentioned this previously. It's been a game changer for our hiring process. It's called The Who by Jeff Smart. It's the best hiring book I've ever. It's absolute best hiring book I've ever read. And it walks you through step by step, like what words to say in an interview, what words not to say in an interview. So he's very explicit about why you can't say certain things. Like, for example, when you're interviewing them, you say, when we talk to your previous employer, how will they rate you on a scale of 1 to 10, for example? Most people say, if we talk to your previous employee, just changing the word if to when dramatically changed the accuracy and honesty of the applicant. And so he goes into all the research behind this and everything. So changing one word in your interview can make all the difference, and how CEO should always be the one interviewing the applicants. It should never be a hiring manager, an HR person. And he goes into why that is. And it's the most important role, as you probably witnessed. The CEO needs to always be recruiting, because you need to be not only motivated, but you need to be motivating. And especially now with cultures being so important, companies with being more transparent, they really want to see who's the leader of this company and what's their vision, what's the trajectory, and how do you instill that message in your team of where you're going? How do you instill the vision and the culture that you set forth?
I think what we do is we have our goals set in a way. So we have our weekly goals, we have our quarterly goals, so on and so forth. So we start off with the annual growth plan and where we are and where we were last year, same time, and kind of talk about how we're influencing people. One thing I love to do is I love to take my tech team out to meet our customers every once in a while, because they get to see the people who are using what they built. And that really motivates them to, and kind of really, I've seen, they get so excited to actually see people using their solution, because they don't know, right? They're building it for somebody, and they would think that it's being utilized in a certain way. And I've had cases where they've come back and tweaked a little more of what they initially built, because they were witnessing user behavior firsthand. And I like to do activities like that, because I think it's important for them to know who they're building it, what kind of influence they're having in their life. So I think that's really helped with.
I love that. That is an amazing idea. I mean, because a lot of people, have you ever seen that picture where it's like the sidewalk around the grass and it says user design? And then you see that humans actually take the shortcut across the grass, and now there's a dirt path in the grass and it says user experience.
Yeah.
So sometimes the user design doesn't always match the user experience, and it's not their fault. It's sometimes they're not with the user, they're behind a computer. And you actually thought of a brilliant idea, which is bring the team to the customer and show them how the user is using the product they just built.
Yeah. I think that's a very powerful, I think that's been a very powerful approach.
How did you come up with that idea?
Actually, it was by chance, because initially when we started, we were a team of like 4 or 5 people. And we also needed the tech team to come in to kind of check out if there are any issues with the customer. Somebody say, hey, I can't get through this, can you guys help me? So we would end up doing tech support ourselves, and sometimes on site as well. That we saw was very helpful for somebody who built it to interact with the customer. So as we got bigger, I still followed that, because I definitely have seen productivity increase there.
Sometimes we end up in these situations where we learn from just a happenstance, unique experience, and it sounds like you did that. It reminds me of when we have to be scrappy, being an early entrepreneur, early startup. What's something scrappy you did to hustle that maybe you couldn't have revealed when you were first starting out, Madhavi, but now you can reveal that it's later on?
I think probably, what we would have done is we would have probably had, same people for tech support, same person for, for building the application, and sometimes even customer service. So, we've had that where we just kind of end up using different titles and names, but it kind of is, the same person really handling multiple roles. So we've done that in the past.
I've heard that several times, like, hold on, let me get the director of finance, and you're the same person on the other end of the phone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That happens mostly on emails. I think it's easier on emails to kind of get away with that. So yeah, definitely. So,
Madhavi, thanks for sharing.
That's a part of the process.
We're going to transition now into something I like to call the under 30 seconds round. I'm going to fire off some questions and answer them as fast as you can. First thing that comes to mind. Ready? 1, what is the book you've gifted more often than any other book, and why?
The Lean Startup, because I get asked a lot of times, how do I start something? How do I build it? I've read that book so many times, and it's really helped me get a head start. So definitely The Lean Startup.
Great book, Eric Ries. And also that now speaks to your point of how you validated the customer first before you went and built the prototype. And then you iterate. Correct. Number 2, what's one of the best investments and one of the worst investments you've ever made, and why?
Best investments definitely has to be my company. So all my savings that I stacked up while I was working in Australia straight went to Space Basic. So that's been my best investment so far. Worst investment, I don't know. I just feel like, when you're younger, you just buy random things when you really look back, you're like, gosh, I could have put this into something else, maybe the stock market or something like that. But yeah.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, and you youngins out there, make sure you're investing early. What's the
Absolutely.
most impactful thing you do in your morning routine and the most impactful thing you do in your evening routine?
Morning definitely has to be meditation. So I've picked that up. I've done, over the last 1 year, it's definitely helped me. So it has to be meditation. Evening, I try to get some steps in. So in the morning, if I don't have time to meditate and work out, I try to get my steps in the evening. So most days it's evening. So yeah, before I go to bed, I have to get that in.
Is there a certain type of meditation that you use? And with regard to the steps, where do you do them? Are you just jogging in place?
Oh, I'm on the treadmill with my phone on. I'm just like trying to get, I try to do some calls on that too. So, if I'm lagging behind, I get that covered there. So yeah. No, meditation, I used to do guided meditation before. But now I think I've stepped away from guided, so I'm able to kind of draw that concentration span a little longer without guided. So that's been really helpful.
Good for you. And if someone's listening and they want to start meditating, what would you recommend they start with?
I used to use the app called Calm.
Calm,
it's very
CALM.
crisp.
That's a good one. Yes.
CALM. It's crisp. So it's got a couple of seconds to a minute to a longer kind of trench of time. So it really depends on how you like to get started.
Awesome. Pretend you won the Peter Thiel Fellowship and you were going to get money to start a business instead of go to college. What's the very first thing you do to start your new business?
I'm Indian, so I can't not go to college. So probably I'd still have to go to college. Yeah, I'd still have to go to college. But what would I have done? I don't know. I think I would probably started something similar. Like I've been very passionate about the education space, so I would have probably started something similar much sooner on, 22, 23.
Good answer. And last question, what's something you never knew you needed?
Patience. I think I've learned that patience really. I'm not very. It's an acquired trait, I'd say. I think like most millennials, we want it now, but it actually it's something that it's a good trait to have, definitely for an entrepreneur.
Patience. Thank you so much for being here today, Madhavi. Before you go, what's next for you? What's the next big goal or milestone or bucket list item you want to achieve?
I think for me, I definitely want to reach 1 million users and impact their life with Space Basic. That's definitely a goal for us. It's something that we wanted to achieve this year. We'll see how we go with COVID, but that's definitely that's the biggest thing we want to do in the immediate future. We also want to be in different countries besides just India. So we'd like to see that through America, UAE and Southeast Asia, some areas of interest. So we'll see how we do that. But these two things definitely on the top of my list.
Well, if you are a school administrator or university or hospital, you know where to go, Space Basic. And where do listeners go to connect with you directly?
I'm very active on LinkedIn or on emails too. So I think either would be good.
Please go connect with Madhavi. We'll put her LinkedIn in the show notes. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today. This is Madhavi with Space Basic, who makes sure they're tracking the data for student housing, for medical institutions, for anyone that needs to track large numbers of people coming into their institution. We learned so much today, how to adapt to a new culture, how to hire properly, how to set forth KPIs and your vision. Madhavi, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Phil. Such a great pleasure talking to you.
I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Have an amazing day.
Thanks for joining us today. I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me. Who do you think would benefit from hearing it? You can make an impact on their life by sharing it now. Before you go, I encourage you to tell us your favorite part of the episode in the review section. Now it's time to level up. Level up.